Hey everyone, and welcome to my first YouTube video. In this video, we'll be talking about Goji Center's Hybrid War contest, and the vicious theropod hybrid that I entered into it. The rules of the contest are simple. Design an at least mostly terrestrial hybrid animal that's strong enough to defeat the Indominus 2.0 in a 1v1 combat scenario. The winner of the contest is the hybrid best equipped at defeating the Indom 2.0, not necessarily the most powerful hybrid. This means contest entries will be judged based on how capable they are of defeating Indom 2.0 rather than how capable they are of defeating each other. Defeating the Indominus 2.0 is no easy task. Goji Center designed it to be a more deadly version of the Indominus Rex from Jurassic World, while being as biologically realistic as possible. This meant applying real-world physics and anatomical plausibleness to the design of their hybrid. I'll talk more about the Indominus 2.0 and my hybrid's matchup against it later in this video, but for more complete details on Goji Center's creation, you can check out his video about it linked in the description below. Anyways, the same rules of biological realism used in the creation of the Indom 2.0 apply to all contest entries in the Great Hybrid War. This means that any unrealistic entries, such as a kaiju-sized animal that couldn't exist in real life without crushing itself under its own weight, or this monstrosity, get a one-way ticket to the Hall of Shame. Speaking of kaijus, despite contest entries being fictional creatures, no fictional creatures other than Jurassic Park animals are allowed to be part of a contest entry's genome. This means no Godzilla or Arcgiga genes allowed. The only real-world animals whose genes are banned from being used in the contest are humans, meaning all other real-life animals, both living and extinct, are allowed. Goji Center's contest was open for submission on February 9th, which was nearly 3 months ago, with a 24-hour submission time window. In that quick time window, 1655 hybrids were entered. With so many contest entries, I didn't expect to make it this far, but as of the time I'm making this video, I'm 99% sure that my hybrid made it to the final 16. Goji Center released the Hall of Shame video about a month ago, which showcased the worst hybrids entered into the contest, followed by the Honorable Mentions video about 3 weeks ago, which revealed the best hybrids that didn't make it to the top 16. Based on what I saw from the Honorable Mentions, I'd be surprised if my hybrid doesn't make the finals. Why? Because it's ridiculously powerful. For this contest, I designed a savage beast, one designed to be the ultimate terrestrial predator, an animal so voracious that it may be able to defeat the Indom 2.0 at its own game of being a deadly theropod. If I don't make the final 16, that'd be really funny and you could laugh at me for looking stupid, but like I said, I'm pretty confident that I made it. Presuming that I do make it, the top 16 will compete in a single elimination tournament, with the first place winner getting the honor of challenging the Indom 2.0. Without further ado, I think it's time for me to introduce that potential challenger.
Ladies and gentlemen, turn your attention to the southwest corridor. And stop! Perfect! Representing the chum bucket, a creature so fearsome, so terrible, so mind-bendingly large that those of you with weak constitutions may want to leave the stadium.
I gotta get out of here!
Too late! Ready or not, here he comes. Quake with fear, you mortal fools! Bow down before the awesome might of...
The Utahraptor carnivorum. With an estimated average adult length of 13.3 meters and hip height of 3.85 meters, this animal's name, which means ultimate carnivorous land lizard, weighs 10 metric tons, composed of 14 genetic contributors, and with each contributor being a terrestrial carnivore, the Utahraptor just might live up to its name. Each contributor animal plays an important role in its combat ability, and was carefully picked so as to not give the hybrid health issues. I'd like to go over the details of what each of these component animals contributes to my hybrid's genome individually, starting with the two animals making up the base genome, Tyrannosaurus rex and Giganotosaurus. T-Rex and Giganotosaurus were the two largest theropod dinosaurs that we currently know of. Rex was likely the heavier of the two, while Giga was likely the longer animal. In terms of standing height, Giga is currently estimated to have had longer legs, while Rex had a thicker back and hips, making their back height approximately equal. In truth, it's hard to tell which of these two animals was larger than the other, simply because we only have two fossil specimens of Giga that aren't just teeth or footprints. Regardless, both of these animals were incredibly big, weighing in the range of 8 to 10 metric tons for average adults. In terms of combat ability, each species has specific advantages over the other. The Utahraptor incorporates the advantages of both animals in its base genome. Most of the torso anatomy comes from T-Rex, granting it a wide ribcage in addition to gastralia, and a thick backbone coupled with large hips. This grants it impressive bulk and thick musculature from T-Rex as well. Gastralia are a set of underside ribs that give the Utahraptor a deep chest and act as armor under its skin, adding protection to this area of its body. The hips coming from T-Rex are imperative for my hybrid to be agile, since T-Rex was found to be twice as agile as other large theropods for its size, and much of this agility comes from hip anatomy. In short, T-Rex hips and powerful upper leg muscles enabled it to pivot quickly for its size, making it an incredibly maneuverable animal. With this in mind, the upper leg bones and musculature of Utahraptor mostly come from T-Rex, while the lower leg bones and musculature mostly come from Giganotosaurus. Why, you may ask? While T-Rex could turn faster than Giga, Giga could run faster. This comes from having longer legs than Rex. Bipeds with longer legs tend to run faster than those with shorter ones, and it helps more when this length comes from the tibia and fibula rather than the femur. This is why ostriches, which are literally birds built for speed, have marginally longer lower leg bones than upper leg bones. Another good example of this is the T-Rex specimen nicknamed E.D. Cope, which had short yet robust femurs for its size, coupled with long lower leg bones. Cope was a huge Rex specimen, larger than even Sue, and it may have been these leg proportions that enabled it to live to such an old age and grow to such a large size. With these proportions, it could run faster than most other adult T-Rex despite being larger than them, giving it an edge when chasing prey. Anyway, Giga may have had slightly longer tibias than T-Rex on average, but this is a small difference. It had decently longer femurs, but giving these long femurs to the Utahraptor would compromise its hip-turning ability. Overall, the leg proportions of my hybrid granted the agility of a T-Rex coupled with the running speed of Giganotosaurus. These leg proportions are influenced by other animals being present in the genome as well, which I'll talk about later on in this video. Anyway, since we're still talking about T-Rex and Giga, it's time we talk about the Utahraptor's head. T-Rex is famous for its bone-crushing bite power, so it's no surprise the Utahraptor has a jawbone that mostly comes from T-Rex. The teeth come from T-Rex as well, and the size and structure of the facial muscles. The only influence that Giga has on the jawbone is slightly elongating it in its midsection. Why? Giga's head was better equipped for ramming than T-Rex's, which mostly comes from the larger bony ridges running down its snout and above its eyes. T-Rex had these ridges as well, but they were smaller. Giga gives Utahraptor a slightly elongated jaw compared to T-Rex, but less elongated than Giga itself. Additionally, Giganotosaurus had a longer tail than T-Rex, and a longer, more flexible neck. Utahraptor mostly has the neck anatomy of Giganotosaurus, and most of its tail musculature and bone structure comes from Giganotosaurus too. This makes its tail better equipped for whipping than a T-Rex based one, and its neck more maneuverable, thus further boosting the hybrid's agility. With the base genome of Utahraptor being established, which mainly grants it great size and power, it looks like it's time for me to talk about the other 12 animals that affect its anatomy. First, I'll mention the spotted hyena. The spotted hyena is a deadly mid-sized predatory mammal. Hyenas are known for being formidable for their size, and in groups have been known to bully African lions away from their kills. Two main attributes of the spotted hyena are present in Utahraptor's genome. One of these is bite force. You may have questioned why I would give the Utahraptor a Giganotosaurus-based neck structure, when such a neck structure would normally hinder its bites. Giga had a weaker bite than T-Rex after all, but its bite was still by no means weak. However, neck muscles do influence biting power, so giving the Utahraptor a longer, more flexible neck than a T-Rex would normally weaken its biting power. That's where the spotted hyena comes in. Hyenas are famous for having ridiculously strong bites that can crush bone, and what do they also have? Long necks. So for this reason, the neck muscles in Utahraptor associated with biting are gene-edited to have the structure of spotted hyena neck musculature. This combination enables the Utahraptor to maintain a bone-crushing bite, while still having better head and neck-turning ability than a T-Rex. Including the spotted hyena does not shrink the neck muscle size, it still has that size from Giganotosaurus. Anyway, the other main attribute from the spotted hyena included in the genome is a strong immune system. Hyenas are one of the most disease-resistant animals, able to shake off sicknesses that would normally kill most other animals, even rabies. They can also be immune to anthrax and survive severe injuries that the vast majority of animals would die from due to infection. This strengthened immune system from the spotted hyena allows Utahraptor to carry many pathogens without trouble, and also, like the hyena, grants it an infectious bite. There are other aspects to Utahraptor's bite that make it even more deadly, but before I talk more about my hybrid's offensive abilities, I should discuss the animal that may contribute the most to its defense, the Cuban Crocodile. Goji Center gave their Indominus 2.0 full-body armor, which came from the African dwarf crocodile. The Utahraptor also has full-body armor, but it instead comes from the Cuban crocodile. Like the African dwarf crocodile, the Cuban crocodile is another crocodilian species alive today, known for having more formidable osteoderms than most. In fact, it is even more heavily armored than the African dwarf crocodile overall, just not on the underside. This, however, doesn't really matter. Utahraptor already has thick skin all over its body from Giganotosaurus and T-Rex, as well as underside gastralia from T-Rex, further thickening the skin all over its body with DNA from the Cuban crocodile, as well as granting thick osteoderms on its limbs, back, tail, and head, provide it with incredibly durable full-body protection. A huge advantage of using the Cuban crocodile in my hybrid over the African dwarf crocodile is the fact that the Cuban one is the most terrestrial crocodilian alive today. This prevents the crocodilian influence from encouraging my hybrid to want to go for a swim rather than fight on land. Cuban crocodiles are probably the most agile crocodilian alive today as well, being the only one capable of performing a galloping gait on land. And of course, agility is an important aspect of combat ability. The Cuban crocodile DNA also thickens the base of my hybrid's tail. This heavy and stable tail base allows Utahraptor to rear up on its back legs and drag its tail if it wants to, in a tripod stance. This is not a stance that it would move around in normally, but it does have the option to use it for gaining height advantage on enemy combatants. This tripod stance option couples extremely well with my hybrid's massive arms, which you may have noticed in the illustration of it. These arms mostly come from the genetic influence of two animals. One of these animals is Allosaurus anax, the dinosaur previously known as Saurophaganax. Allosaurus anax was potentially the land carnivore with the largest arms, and had arms similar in proportional size to those of the original Indominus rex. This Jurassic theropod gives its arm bone and hand bone structure, as well as a bit of its arm musculature, to Utahraptor. To face the Indominus 2.0, however, Utahraptor needs even more powerful arms. Enter the short-faced bear, Arctotherium angustidens, the largest bear known to have existed. Being a bear, Arctotherium was a quadruped and had much larger arms in proportion to its body size than any theropod. DNA from this bear massively increases the size of my hybrid's arm muscles and arm bones, and also grants it 5 fingers and 5 toes on each limb. The arm size to body size ratio in Utahraptor is halfway between the ratio seen in Arctotherium and Allosaurus. This makes my hybrid a facultative biped. So in other words, it spends most of its time walking on 2 legs with its tail off the ground, but a good amount of its time walking on 4 limbs. Its arm musculature comes almost entirely from Arctotherium, giving it incredible swiping and grappling ability, as well as stability due to being able to walk on all 4s. This animal is not easy to topple over. Fast twitch muscle fibers and high muscle density from Arctotherium are present throughout its body as well, but mostly in the arms. The arms also gain a light fur coating. You may have also noticed these huge slasher claws on the illustration of Utahraptor. The hybrid has 5 fingers on each hand, and 2 claws per hand come from Megaraptor, while the other 3 come from Torvosaurus. Why, you may ask? Just take a look at the size of Megaraptor's claws. These huge hook-shaped claws are some of the biggest in the fossil record that were actually used for ripping apart prey. Placing gigantic meat hooks like these on the hands of bare muscle-enhanced theropod arms would make a single swipe from Utahraptor fatal to almost any land animal alive today. Megaraptor only had 2 claws on each hand that were this large, and so my hybrid benefits from the 3 smaller claws per hand coming from Torvosaurus. These scythe-shaped claws are more ideal for slashing than the hook-shaped yet similar-sized claws of Allosaurus Anax used in Goji Center's Indominus 2.0. Hook-shaped claws are good for slashing too, however, and are even better than scythe-shaped ones for gripping. This means Utahraptor can use its 5-fingered hands both for slashing huge chunks of flesh out of prey and for lodging them into prey to grip on and then sink its teeth into their hide. It's time I mentioned an animal that affects all 4 limbs of Utahraptor, that animal being Utahraptor. Being the largest dromaeosaur, Utahraptor had legs that were well adapted for kicking and pinning down prey. Utahraptor has a major influence on my hybrid's legs. First of all, it provides one of the toes on each of the feet with a huge sickle claw. It also causes the feet to be bigger. Dromaeosaurs had larger feet proportionally than most other theropods. General foot anatomy for my hybrid comes from Giganotosaurus, and the toe claws besides the sickle one come from Giganotosaurus too. However, the foot size to body size ratio in my hybrid is halfway between the ratio seen in Giganotosaurus and Utahraptor. This gives the feet more surface area, making Utahraptor even more stable on its legs than it already was. Utahraptor is one of the few animals in nature with tibias and femurs that are approximately the same length, and so Utahraptor slightly alters the shape of Utahraptor's leg bones. The femurs are thick and robust from T-Rex, but get further shortened from Utahraptor. The tibias and fibulas are long and robust from Giganotosaurus, but get further lengthened from Utahraptor. This grants Utahraptor slightly longer tibias than femurs, making it have superior hip-turning ability and running speed than even the ED Cope T-Rex specimen. So while these leg changes from Utahraptor may not make my hybrid quite as good at kicking and pinning down prey as an actual dromaeosaur, they do bring it closer to dromaeosaur territory. Being so large, Utahraptor can only run so fast and kick so well, but it does so incredibly well for a 10-ton animal. It may have had similar kicking ability to Meraxes, a Carcharodontosaur closely related to Giga that had a big toe claw on each foot. Utahraptor also causes the hybrid's legs to have slightly more fast-twitch muscle fibers associated with kicking, and provides the hybrid with its finger bone and finger muscle structure. That's right, when I designed the Utahraptor, I didn't mess around. Fine details like these matter when trying to design a creature that can fight the Indominus 2.0 and win most of the time. Dromaeosaurs had some of the best finger dexterity among theropods, granting my hybrid dinosaur enhanced gripping ability. Speaking of fine details, I'm almost done covering Utahraptor's entire genome. There are just a few more genetic contributors that add fine boosts to its combat ability. Carnotaurus grants it thicker bone above its eyes, as well as brow horns. This enhances its ramming ability, which was already enhanced in comparison to T-Rex from Giga. The Giga DNA ever so slightly elongated the T-Rex-based jaws, which gave the top of the head more surface area for headbutts. The bony ridges running down the snout in Utahraptor are likewise ever so slightly larger than they are in T-Rex, but the Carnotaurus contribution matters a lot more when it comes to ramming. In fact, the ridges that run down the snout are closer to how they look in T-Rex than they do in Giga. If they looked more like Giga ridges, the snout would be too long, and the bite power might be weakened too much. Thankfully, the biting muscles which come from T-Rex and the spotted hyena have a high tolerance for the snout being elongated. Just look at the snout of a spotted hyena. It's pretty long. Anyway, to prevent my dinosaur's teeth from breaking, the northern short-tailed shrew is another genetic contributor. This shrew is also used in the Indominus 2.0 and grants both it and my hybrid iron-coated teeth, as well as a mouth that secretes venom. I wanted to use different venom than Goji Center did for my dinosaur, but the Shrew seems like the most powerful option. Unlike most venom, which is injected through an animal's teeth, Shrew venom is literally produced in the saliva, which avoids the risk of pairing a powerful bite with teeth that are supposed to inject fluid. Teeth of this nature, like those of venomous snakes, tend to be fragile and would break easily if paired with a strong bite. I would rather make my dino's teeth stronger. As in the Indominus 2.0, the Utahraptor also has easy access to a state of adrenaline rush. Though, in the Indominus's case, Goji said that it was in a constant state of adrenaline rush. I'd say that the Shrew DNA has a bit less of an influence on my hybrid's mental state than this, because being in a constant state of adrenaline rush might cause my hybrid to act erratically and make rash decisions. So, having easy access to it from the Shrew seems strong enough. An animal that I considered for venom instead of the Shrew is the Komodo Dragon. Komodo Dragon venom is simply weaker than Shrew venom, but the Komodo Dragon still finds its way into my hybrid's genome. The first of its contributions is thickening the gums and front of the snout. This ensures that all of Allosaurus's teeth fit in its mouth when the mouth is closed. To avoid issues with moisturizing the teeth and gums, Allosaurus has lips. Komodo dragons also have strong immune systems and venom resistance, which is added to my hybrid. The most important contribution, however, may be the ability to tail whip. The structure of my dino's tail towards its tip comes from the Komodo dragon, causing the tail to be more flexible than the stiff tail of Giganotosaurus. I must stress, however, that most of the tail structure still comes from Giga. If it didn't, then this animal would have a hard time holding its tail up when walking on 4 legs and in a standard theropod stance. With mostly the tip of the tail coming from Komodo Dragon, Allosaurus is capable of performing a pretty vicious tail whip. Not as efficient for its size as a monitor lizard, but still much deadlier than the lackluster tail whip of a typical stiff-tailed theropod. When moving on 4 legs, Allosaurus would hold its tail high off the ground in an arc shape, while when walking in the standard theropod gait, it'd have its tail held parallel to the ground. When using the tripod stance, the Komodo Dragon DNA would greatly enhance this pose. The tip of the tail would actually be able to drag across the ground, and instincts from both the bear and Komodo Dragon would enhance its ability to move around this way. Both bears and monitor lizards are pretty good at walking upright on their back legs, despite normally being quadrupedal animals. The tripod stance would, however, be the least common gait for this animal, and it would walk slowly when in the stance. It should also be noted that most theropods, such as T-Rex and Carnotaurus, were capable of rearing up on their back legs to a degree, and Allosaurus would be much better at it than they are. This stance would definitely pair extremely well in combat when paired with the bear arms. In a matchup against the Indominus 2.0, for instance, Allosaurus in this stance could easily swipe directly at its combatant's face. Another contribution that I should mention from the Komodo Dragon is enhanced instincts when it comes to turning its head with its flexible neck. Monitor lizards are great at this after all. You may have noticed by now that the Allosaurus has a general theropod build, but with the ability to execute many specialized combat strategies nearly as well as, or better, than theropod groups that specialize in them. Being able to do all of this requires a lot of agility and flexibility. Genetic contributors such as the bear, Giga, and T-Rex greatly boost this agility, but there's a group of carnivorous animals alive today that can boost the flexibility even further: cats. And in this case, not just any cat, but Smilodon populator, one of the largest cats to have ever existed. What makes cats so flexible? It mostly comes from their joints. If Allosaurus were to have every joint in its body enhanced in flexibility to match what's seen in cats, a lot of its joints would likely become too weak and loose to handle its huge body size. That's why joint flexibility enhancement comes from Smilodon, a cat specialized in being flexible while also being large. And this is present throughout its entire body, however, not to the point where the joints are weakened. So in other words, they are simply enhanced by Smilodon DNA, but not to the point where the joints actually match what's seen in Smilodon. Still, this ensures that my dinosaur is as flexible as possible for its size and build. It's a vicious, savage creature that's going to come as close as it can to moving around like Nargacuga from Monster Hunter, but it's still a good ways off from that. It'll be more agile, though, than Goji Center's Indominus 2.0. Another genetic contribution from Smilodon is those saber teeth. 3 animals in the genome, being the hyena, bear, and Smilodon, have pretty big canines. This will cause the fangs at the front of my hybrid's mouth, especially on the top jaw, to be enlarged. Not nearly to the point proportionally as what's seen in Smilodon, but enough to give the Utahraptor better gripping ability while biting. Hyena bites are great at gripping, so this pairs well with that bite musculature. Paired with an iron coating from the short-tailed shrew, these large front teeth are not going to break easily. Smilodon teeth, though often touted as fragile, are almost never found broken in Smilodon fossils, implying that they were at least decently strong. The last genetic contribution from Smilodon is the shortening of the toe bones on the non-sickle-clawed toes. Why on earth would I include this? Well, this makes the toe claws less likely to impede my hybrid's running ability, and also grants tufts of hair on these toes. The toe claws are not retractable and still come from Giga. By having light fur on its arms and toes, and having some cat DNA, old Pterosaurus may have occasionally swallowed its own hair when grooming itself. If it ate enough hair, it could spit out hairballs like a cat, and these hairballs could technically be dangerous. Not that this would be effective against the Indom 2.0, but the hairballs would likely be venom-coated and infectious due to the spotted hyena genes. This was nearly a joke contribution to my animal, but it is an actual serious yet silly ability that it has, and not one that really matters in terms of combat. It's basically never going to actually come up. But hey, technically, my hybrid has access to a projectile weapon. The last genetic contributor to my hybrid is the California Kingsnake. This gives it even more venom resistance than it already had from the Komodo Dragon, and a slightly wider esophagus. This makes eating things for it faster, since it's able to swallow larger chunks of flesh. This isn't so important in a fight against the Indom 2.0, but it's a nice enhancement to its ability to survive in the wild. This animal would have a pretty big caloric intake in real life, so being able to eat faster isn't bad. A wider esophagus could also enable it to cough up hairballs easier. That was mostly a joke. But it's technically a real benefit, not a detriment. Anyway, now onto the final aspects of the Utahraptor carnivorum. It's an animal that technically has resistances to all 4 types of venom thanks to its genetic contributors, has an excellent immune system, and bolsters overall weaponry that no other terrestrial predator has ever managed to possess. I tried to design it to be the ultimate terrestrial carnivore, and it does a good job living up to its name. It just might be in the final 16 of the Great Hybrid War, and if it is, I hope that it takes the title of being the first place theropod build. It might be able to thrive if it existed in real life, and could even reproduce both sexually and asexually due to DNA from the Komodo Dragon. In a fight against the Indominus 2.0, it'd probably have a decent advantage due to being more agile, and doesn't have any major disadvantages other than being less intelligent. Intelligence wouldn't be a huge factor in this matchup anyway, since the Utahraptor is smart enough to use all of its weaponry, and has the eyesight and sharp sense of smell of a T-Rex. With all of its genetic contributors being terrestrial carnivores, it'd have great predatory instincts, and it'd likely be about as intelligent as T-Rex itself. T-Rex was not stupid, currently estimated to have been more intelligent than dogs, but less intelligent than apes. Given this level of intelligence, Utahraptor would have good problem-solving ability, and potentially a minor ability to use tools. These tools wouldn't be much more complicated than wielding a super big stick though, which it could do, thanks to the dexterity of its hands. It'd have equal or greater ability than the Indominus 2.0 when it comes to grappling, since bears, used in the arms, are honestly more specialized at brawling than apes, which are used in the arms of the Indom 2.0. Additionally, the shrew venom from Utahraptor would be resisted but not negated by the Indom 2.0, and vice versa, but Goji Center's theropod would probably be the one getting bitten more due to old Pterosaurus's agility advantage. My hybrid was admittedly designed more for raw power than for simply countering Goji Center's hybrid, but with that great power, it should be able to win against the Indominus 2.0 more times than not. I have successfully listed all of Pterosaurus's basic attributes and abilities. By the way, this illustration was made by the talented EM1020, whose profile I have linked in the description below. Well people, I wish you all the best, and I'll see you in my next video.